Good morning, everyone. It's 10 a.m. and welcome to the public for coming to today's State Canvassing Board meeting or listening online. I just want to confirm, Mr. Fafi, that the link is live, correct, on YouTube? And also the link to register to go ahead and testify. We will now convene the State Canvassing Board for the 2024 general election. I'm Chuck Gray, the Wyoming Secretary of State, and pursuant to Wyoming state law, I'm chairing the Wyoming State Canvassing Board. I will note for the record that all members of the State Canvassing Board are present. Governor Mark Gordon is present, State Auditor Christy Racinas is present, as well as State Treasurer Kurt Meyer, and myself, the Secretary of State. Pursuant to Wyoming state statute, the State Canvassing Board shall meet no later than the second Wednesday following the election. The board shall review the state abstracts prepared by the Secretary of State, resolve any tie votes, and certify the abstract as the official state canvass. This meeting is being live streamed to the public via the Wyoming Secretary of State's YouTube page. Individuals who wish to give virtual public comment may do so through the Zoom link provided in the media release posted to the Wyoming Secretary of State's website. In order to facilitate public comment over Zoom, there is a waiting room, and when public comment begins, everyone will be let in to comment. At that time, please raise your hand and we'll announce individuals and go ahead and go through the list. That link remains live. We don't have any cutoff, any deadline. We're going to keep that link live so you can continue to register through the end of the meeting. We are going to have two opportunities for public comment. We will have an opportunity for public comment after the complete presentation of the state abstract, which will be before any board action. And then another opportunity after any actions taken by the board. I've emphasized public comment. I'm a huge public comment guy. And so we really have emphasized public comment on the State Canvassing Board. I've seen it in my time as a legislator, my time on the SLIP board, State Board of Land Commissioners, I mean, on the failure of the Columbus Peak Land Exchange, where public comment played a key role in deliberations of boards and within the legislature. And so we've really emphasized this in the State Canvassing Board. The state abstract will indicate by county the number of ballots cast by political party, if known, the total number of votes cast for each candidate, the names of all write-ins receiving a sufficient number of votes to affect the results of the election, and the number of votes for each and the number of votes received for each ballot proposition. Before we dive into the summary of the canvassing matters, I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to the county clerks, election judges, poll watchers, other volunteers that made the 2024 general election a success. I also want to thank, and this is the number one thank you, thank Wyomingites for voting. Voting is a crucial part of our republic, and we saw very strong turnout in the 2024 general election, and we'll dig into that in a moment. Election Day presented a number of issues requiring intervention from our office and from county clerks to resolve a few things that came up on the night of the election as well as the days that followed. However, as will be detailed by our elections director, they were appropriately handled, but it's how we respond to these issues as well as how they inform policy decisions that will help form the foundation of future successful elections in Wyoming on top of this successful election that we had here a little over a week ago. And I will commit to the people of Wyoming that we at the Secretary of State's office are always committed to improvement of our statutes, improvement as a mindset. We don't do this sort of everything's great, nothing can ever be improved. A lot of the worn out slogans that we get in a lot of the articles that are written. We're about improvement and that as a mindset, and that's been a huge focus of our administration. Our elections director, CJ Young, is going to go into a few of the issues we encountered on Election Day. Director Young is joined by Mr. Paul Raines, our assistant director. Let's go ahead and introduce everybody. We got CJ Young, who's our election director, Paul Raines, our assistant director, Micah Fafi is our admin director, and he's running tech for us. We've also got Dusty Schrack, who's in the tech division, and Jesse Naiman to our left, who is our deputy. Joe Rubino, our counsel, is up in the office working very hard on minutes for the meeting. As you know, that is one aspect of this meeting is the preparation of the minutes. With that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Young, our election director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to the board. Thank you very much for your time this morning and for joining us. This meeting, as the Secretary mentioned, is being streamed live to the public, so they may observe and participate via Zoom. Just as a note, we'll have several parts of this meeting dedicated to public comment, as the Secretary pointed out. We'll kick it back over so the Chairman can manage that. And we will ask folks in Zoom to raise their hand or let them know, and then we'll have time in the room as well for public comment. So the election division at the Secretary of State's office, I'd like to make sure I give the shout out first. We couldn't have completed this mammoth task of verifying, comparing, reconciling, and auditing these statewide election results for the canvassing board this morning without help from the other divisions of the Secretary of State's office. We really work as one cohesive team and bring people in to achieve the mission. And so I'd like to ask that our folks from the Secretary of State's office, as well as the county clerks that are here, to please stand and be recognized. Don't be shy. Thank you, guys. All right, thank you all for being here and participating. So I would also like to recognize the efforts of the Wyoming County clerks, their staff, their election judges all across the state who worked hard to make this general election a success. Lastly, I need to offer a special thank you to the Wyoming Office of Homeland Security, the Wyoming Highway Patrol Division O, and our many other federal, state, and local partners that worked with us to support this election. There's too many to name, but if you're listening, you know who you are, and you make this happen and keep our elections safe and secure and moving forward. So thank you. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move into a presentation, some general information and overview for the election for the board's pleasure. So some of our preliminary information and a brief overview of the conduct of the election, which does not require any action from the board at this time. We are, in general, very excited to have conducted a very successful general election for the citizens of our great state of Wyoming. As in years past, our office provided 2 support staff from ES&S, that's Elections Software and Systems, to assist our counties, and the state plane was made available if the need arose to move these staff around to help throughout the city or help throughout the state. Thankfully, everything was able to be handled by our team remotely from our office on the night of the election and in the days that immediately followed prior to county canvassing and moving forward. However, there were a few issues encountered on election day which arose, and they were resolved by the respective county clerks prior to or during their county canvassing. But I wanted to make sure I mentioned these just so you all are aware of some of the things that have occurred in case you get questions on them or just for your general information. There's 5 issues to be exact that are worth noting. Again, they do not require at this time any action from the board. First, in Bighorn County, a ballot was getting scuff marks and wasn't being accepted at the Manderson poll site. ES&S hardware support walked the county staff and election judges at the Manderson poll site through the cleaning process of cleaning the rollers of the DS200s. You'll hear me use the terms, you all are probably very familiar with this, but for anybody listening new, the DS200 is the tabulator that's most commonly used across the state. And if you've voted in person, you've probably put it into the tabulator yourself. You'll also hear me mention today a DS450, that's a bigger one that just tabulates faster. So a couple terms that'll be used today. But once they cleaned off that DS200, the roller, it worked just fine. So kind of like cleaning a roller ball on a mouse or a printer. Second, in Washakie County, we had an error message on a DS200 for which ES&S support said they believed the USB stick was corrupted. The election staff there pulled the stick out and isolated it. They burned a new DS200 USB stick, loaded it into the DS200, and it then produced a ballot jam error. At this point, they opened it up. They noticed a sticky note was actually found in the paper path. And it was most likely from a sticky note probably left on a ballot by accident that was fed in earlier in the day. So they removed this, closed up, and it resolved the issue, and they were able to continue working there without any difficulties. So third, in Fremont County, we have kind of 2. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
You know, Mr. Young, I do want to commend the clerk there. Clerk Para was in a lot of contact with our office. We were on with her throughout that incident, and we monitored that throughout the day, provided some feedback on some suggestions on how to handle that. And I really want to commend the clerk on her diligence on that issue.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. I guess the question I have is that, so you've got an encrypted, I guess, memory stick. And so at that time, you have to burn a new memory stick and get it set up. Do you go back in then after you've got the sticky note out and rerun all of the ballots that were ran previous before the encrypted memory stick?
So it depends upon what point you're getting the error. So if it's the first thing in the morning, Mr. Treasurer, where they haven't done anything yet, then you just put the new stick in, you're fine to go. If it is later in the day, then yes, you would do, I believe, a rerun on that. It kind of depends, and you'll see there is an error later in the night that will have, that's kind of relevant to your question that will maybe help answer
Right,
some of
and
that.
in that situation, Treasurer Meyer, and this is one of the reasons why I was commending the clerk, is she ran all of them again. And we were on the phone as that occurred. Right before that occurred, the sheriff was there. We were monitoring that situation. And our recommendation is usually in those situations where you have an error is to rerun all of them. And so that's what happened in that situation.
Something, Mr. Treasurer, that is relevant in this Washakie County situation is that there actually wasn't a problem with the stick for, we don't know exactly why, but the general hardware support at ES&S thought there was, but it was misdiagnosed. It was actually that paper jam from the sticky note, but for whatever reason, they initially thought it was the USB stick. So the first USB stick actually was not corrupted. So there was a little, even when we found out about it, there was a little confusion to figure out, okay, what actually happened here? So thank you, sir. So moving on to Fremont County, there's kind of two sub-issues here. I'll run through both of them. They had a DS-200 that was accidentally dropped in transit before the polls opened. They inspected it, and it appeared to be fully operational. Additionally, the machine went through the opening procedures on the morning of the election and was fully operational. Once the polls closed, a result tape was processed successfully. However, after the shutdown process, the DS-200 booted right back up instead of completely shutting down. It wasn't supposed to do that. So that stick was pulled from the DS-200, loaded onto a spare DS-200 that had been certified during logic and accuracy testing. And the results tape was manually compared with the original and no difference was discovered. The new DS-200 was closed successfully and the stick results matched the previous DS-200 tapes. An additional issue faced by Fremont County during closing at the end of the night was a DS-200 used for absentee tabulations. In the closeout procedure, the DS-200 produced a loading wheel but did not fully close. So if you've ever had that spinning wheel on your computer, kind of think that kind of thing going on. So it didn't fully close. The DS-200 USB stick was removed and reviewed on the election management software, which showed that the DS-200 stick that was removed from that machine was blank. Additionally, no other ballot totals had been already loaded onto this machine, so there were no ballots in the election management software or on this USB stick. The Fremont County Clerk moved the paper absentee ballots over to a DS-450 for tabulation. Additionally, it's worth noting that during this process, it was observed by multiple members of the public and made available by the clerk to anyone who wished to watch it. These ballots were successfully tabulated on the DS-450 and reconciled by Fremont County. Moving on, fourth in Teton County, a countywide election triggered a recount. So it wasn't a statewide, but it was a local, I believe it was a tax initiative, or but something there triggered the recount. And so when they recounted their whole countywide race, they discovered two ballots that had been jammed during the initial tabulation. These ballots were counted during this recount. So that added 2 additional ballots to the total count. Additionally, during the recount, the numbers on some of the races changed slightly. For example, in the presidential race, totals for Donald Trump went up by 2 votes, Kamala D. Harris went up by 1 vote, and Chase Oliver went up by 1 vote. The undervotes in that race went down by 2 votes for, again, specifically that race for presidential candidate. And this leads to a net increase of 2 votes in that presidential race, which are accounted for by the 2 additional votes that were discovered during the recount. Additionally, we believe potentially those undervotes were reallocated. That's how you had that 4-vote change. So, and pursuant to Wyoming state law, the county canvassing board's recount, accounting for those changes, became the official result that was certified by our office. So. Lastly, in Weston County, we had a more unique situation. And for that one, because it involved some intervention with our office and a little bit of a discussion back and forth, I was going to turn that back to the Chairman, Secretary Gray, to discuss further detail as far as the direct action he took on the situation, and let him cover the details a little more. So,
Well, thank you, Mr.
Chairman,
Young.
back to you.
Because there's been a lot of attention to this matter and because of our office's more direct involvement as it relates to my communication with the County Clerk of Weston County, the County Clerks Association of Wyoming, as well as the Wyoming Attorney General's office, I did want to take a moment to inform the public and talk a little bit about regarding the issue concerning House District 1 in Weston County. The Weston County Clerk used incorrect ballots that she had printed. I want to note that the printing of ballots and the distribution of proper ballots to the polling places is a duty of the county clerks, and that was done incorrectly by the Weston County Clerk. The Weston County Clerk had printed 3 versions of her ballots due to errors on the first 2 versions. The version that should have been exclusively used on election night was the 3rd version. Instead, in some instances, she used the first 2 versions of the ballot. As soon as I saw the anomaly in the results, in the size of the undervote in relation to ballots cast for the candidate listed in House District 1, as soon as I noticed that anomaly on the night of the 2024 general election, November 5th, last Tuesday, I attempted to contact the county clerk, ultimately asking the Weston County Sheriff to locate the county clerk, which he agreed to do. And it is important that county clerks remain accessible on election night, and we have that communication throughout the evening. And I want to thank Sheriff Colvard for his cooperation on this matter, for locating the county clerk. At 11:52 p.m., the county clerk contacted me and initially denied there was any issue. The following morning, our office again made contact with the Weston County Clerk, as we agreed to do that evening to follow up and talk more on this issue. And at that time, we provided a more lengthy presentation on the reasons why we felt she had used incorrect ballots. On Wednesday, later that day, after our communication with her, Clerk Hadlock submitted a post-election audit claiming that there were no errors or observations noted. We're going to discuss this a little further as well later on when we go through the post-election audit. That is very concerning because at that point our concern had been made clear multiple times and even in a formal meeting. And the 21 ballots that had been identified that interacted with House District 1 were part of that post-election audit, and that post-election audit should have caught those errors. By Wednesday evening, an analysis was completed, and it had become clear that there were errors caused by the misuse of the proper ballots by the Weston County Clerk. And we communicated that to her that had become fully clear. We also insisted from the start that to clear up this discrepancy, the Weston County Canvassing Board undertake a hand examination of the ballots to determine accurate counts prior to certification of official results to our office. This hand tabulation confirmed the Weston County Clerk's mistake, and official results were certified by the County Canvassing Board, which are reflected before the State Canvassing Board results today. Although the immediate issue has been resolved, our office has been in contact with the Attorney General's office throughout this process, and also specifically concerning accountability for these actions. And we do plan on a more full analysis evaluating her conduct that we are going to present to a number of offices, including the Attorney General's office, and to further investigate the Weston County Clerk's conduct surrounding the 2024 election, as well as representation she made to our office, which includes that post-election audit. With that, we'll go ahead and continue. Thank you, Mr. Young.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for that discussion on Weston County. I would just like to highlight that we worked diligently to address these issues as they arose, working with election officials around the state on whatever the issue might be. And we will always work with our partners and with counties to continue improving our elections going forward. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to now turn to voter turnout. So we had frankly, a tremendous turnout in this general election across the state of Wyoming. Early absentee was especially high this year. As of the morning of Election Day, just over 45% of registered voters had returned their absentee ballot. Total absentee ballots requested was 100,000, excuse me, getting tongue-tied already. We haven't gotten into most of the numbers. 118,959, and 97% were returned as of Election Day morning. You'll see that we had a turnout of 271,123 Wyomingites voting in this general election. I would also like to note that registered voters recorded the day prior to the general election was 256,251 out of 454,508 voting age population, which gives us 59.7% of the voting age population in Wyoming turning out to vote. Additional information in comparison to those past elections can be found in your summary packet. So let's turn to the post-election audit as required by Wyoming State Statute 22-6-130. So the post-election audit was conducted in all 23 counties. I will note that 21 counties reported no issues with their post-election audit. As you may know, we utilize a statutory formula developed by the University of Wyoming's Department of Mathematics and Statistics. This mathematical tool that considers the race with the closest margin of observable difference to determine a sample size to audit, and that would be significant enough to say that we have a 99% confidence level in the election. So we had two counties that did show on their audit a slight discrepancy. The first one is in Platte County. The audit reported a finding regarding an incorrect tabulation of one ballot and a local hospital district director race. It's important to note that this is a race that was certified by the County Canvassing Board and not by this board. Lastly, in Weston County, Mr. Chairman, would you like to speak any more to the Weston County audit?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Turning to Weston County's initial post-election audit submitted by the Weston County Clerk on November 6, 2024, the audit reported no findings or observations. That was after we had multiple times indicated to the county clerk that we believed that there were issues with the results. We had located that anomaly and indicated that. That post-election audit, because 21 of the 75 ballots that were evaluated did include ballots regarding House District 1 that were affected, that should have been caught by that eyeball examination of the cast vote record in the post-election audit. We then communicated our office with her that we felt that her post-election audit had not been conducted properly. And on November 12th, a post-election audit was resubmitted indicating findings in accordance with the tabulation finalized at their county canvassing board. Go ahead, Director Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for updating us on that Weston County audit information. There is information in regards to the there is information in the audit about the audit in your summary packet. Additionally, your packet also draws out other key components of the election just for your convenience information days, such as statutes pertaining to the canvassing board, voter turnout, as well as some additional supportive information if you just need it handy. But with that, I'd like to turn next to candidate participation. And for the purposes of this presentation, when I say statewide, it is in reference to candidates who filed to run with our office. This includes federal, legislative, and judicial retention races. On the ballot this general election, we have 3 federal, 77 state legislative, and 30 retention elections, along with 1 constitutional amendment. There were no successful write-in campaigns for state or federal office. There were a total of 103 candidates, 9 federal, 18 state, and 18 Senate, and 76 House candidates. In addition, there were 30 judges up for retention. So, continuing on, in regards to recounts, in your packets, you will see the statutes pertaining to recounts, and in accordance with Wyoming State Statute 22-16-109, a mandatory recount occurs when the difference in votes was less than 1%. However, there were no mandatory statewide recounts in this election. However, I will note, just for the record and for your all's knowledge, there was a recount requested pursuant to statute 22-16-110 in Albany County for House District 13. The recount was conducted yesterday, and it did not change the results that were certified to our office. So, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to walk the board through the 2024 statewide general election abstract for our presentation of results.
Director Young, we're going to do public comment now. Thank you. We're going to do
you
that a
want to do
little
one
later.
now?
That's
Okay,
point 3.
gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
Actually, no, go ahead.
Yeah,
We're
okay,
going to
I
do
thought
public
we had it
comment after the
Okay,
presentation.
gotcha. All right.
Thank you.
So, of course. Mr. Chairman, the statewide abstract was verified, compared, reconciled, and audited. The first section begins with the total ballots cast data. The first page is the total ballots cast statewide, which is broken down by county with totals at the bottom. Following the statewide total ballots cast section in each county's total ballots cast, which is broken down by precinct, again with the totals at the bottom. If you look at each county total broken down by precinct, you will see that the total ballots cast will reconcile with the statewide ballots cast for that county. The next section is the statewide candidate summary. Each race is broken down by county. The first race is for the United States President, and Donald Trump defeated Kamala D. Harris and Chase Oliver. The second is for the United States Senate, with John Barrasso defeating Scott Morrow. The third place race is for U.S. Representative, with Harriet Hageman defeating Kyle G. Cameron, Richard Brubaker, and Jeffrey Haggett. That concludes the federal races. The next section is the statewide summary of the 15 state Senate races on the ballot, broken down by county with totals at the bottom. The next section is the statewide summary of the 62 state House races, which is the largest section, again broken down by county with totals at the bottom. Additionally, all 30 statewide judges were up for retention elections, 2 Supreme Court justices, 14 Wyoming District Court judges, and 14 Circuit Court judges were all on the ballot. All were retained. Moving on to the Constitutional Amendment A, which is entitled Separate Residential Property Class for Tax Assessment. I'd just like to briefly note that the Wyoming State Constitution, Article 20, Section 1, in order to pass a constitutional amendment, must receive a majority of the total ballots cast in the election. The total ballots cast for this election was 271,123. Therefore, based on the total number of ballots cast, the majority needed was 135,562. The total votes received for this amendment was 146,336, and therefore Constitutional Amendment A passed. The next section is a precinct by precinct results by county with totals at the bottom. And the final section is write-ins today. Although it's included in your book, this is the easiest section for you all to review because there are no successful write-ins, so that makes that one a lot simpler for us. So for statewide or legislative write-ins to report. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn it back to you for any comments from the public.
Well, thank you, Director Young. And now we will begin our first round of public comment. Again, we will have 2 rounds of public comment. The first is now after the presentation of the statewide abstract, and that is before any board action according to the agenda. And then after any board action, we will have further public comment. So we're going to go ahead and start in the room, and then we will proceed to the Zoom. Have we let everybody in? Let's go ahead and let everybody in on the Zoom. And as soon as you come into the waiting room, go ahead and raise your hands if you wish to comment. We will get to you here in a moment. Let's go ahead and start in the room. Yes. Any public comment in the room? Clerk Irvin, any?
This is Rick Martin.
Yep, Mr. Martin. We're going to go ahead and start in the room, okay? So just raise
I'm
your
on my
hand.
phone.
If you could stay muted
I'm
on
on.
Zoom, please. Thank you. All right, Clerk Irvin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I did not intend to speak at this point. Similar to my spiel at the primary election canvassing, I believe in that that duty of this board to really examine without interference from the county clerks, but
We'll have another round if
and I really just want to offer, if there's any questions about, any further about the Weston County issue or the audit questions, I think the secretary laid it out very well. You know, Dr. Seuss wrote the book, Oh, the Places You'll Go. I think if he were to write one about elections, it would be, Oh, the Things You'll See. And it's always something that pops up that we've got to navigate. In Weston specifically, Clerk Hadlock has taken full ownership of that issue. It's a uniquely human error. And so confident that reached a positive resolution and accurate count in that situation. But if there were any questions, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Treasurer Meyer, go ahead.
I guess there's always lessons to be learned by mistakes, and I guess maybe the lesson on this one is that that there's some kind of audit returns that goes from the county clerks to the Secretary of State's office about the number of ballots that were printed, where they were printed, and just kind of short summary. So that would maybe draw the attention to the clerks when they do their audit, that those things have to balance out. That if you printed 10,000 ballots and you had 7,500 people actually voted, then you've got to account for the missing 2,500, so to speak. And I just to kind of give a overview, so these things that might come up, and I didn't know whether that's something that you might recommend that either by policy or by statute that the secretary entertain in I guess some kind of a additional check that would draw attention to mishaps.
Mr. Clerk Irvin, thank you.
Malcolm is fine, I promise. Mr. Chairman, Treasurer Meyer, I appreciate that. We have a call scheduled with the Secretary of State's office next week specifically about policy. And there will be a recap and some suggestions. That reconciliation is not really codified and potentially should be. Of note, 22 of 23 counties did have some sort of reconciliation that we're able to show those number of ballots ordered, delivered, and deployed on Election Day. But your point is well taken, Mr. Treasurer, and we'll work closely with the Secretary of State's office, as we always do, leading up to the legislature when we contemplate potential changes to statute or promulgation of rules.
Yes, and thank you, Clerk Irvin, and thank you for those comments, Treasurer Meyer. I think reconciling the counts, I mean, Georgia's looked at that, and that's something we're going to continue to look at. But the issue here was a little more on the ballot alignment, because when she used the first two versions of the ballot, and look, clerks all the time will have mistakes on first versions of the ballot, and so they'll redo the printing of the ballots. But the last version is the version that needs to be used, because that's what they, in terms of alignment, that's what is the way the election is sort of, within the USB stick programmed, if you will. And so when the alignment was messed up, when everything was moved down, that meant that a vote for Representative Nyman was cast as an undervote in the cases where those first two versions of the ballot were used. But I think, coming out of this colloquy, I really appreciate it, because one of the challenges in the election code as it stands right now, and I do think over the past decades, it's maybe practice has changed it a little bit. The election code is beautiful because it says at the start that the Secretary of State is the chief election official for the state, and the county clerks are the chief election officials for the county. So you have this beautiful check and balance, just like you have in the Constitution. And I think the legislature, when they fashion the election code, of course, the fact that the Secretary of State is the chief election official is been since Wyoming was a territory and is really there in the Constitution. But when they fashioned that election code, I think they meant to have this check and balance that was there. And I appreciate it. It's not supposed to be acrimonious. I think Clerk Irvin really appreciates that. That's not the point of it. We have to appreciate that we're there to check each other, and that's the way we do things in the United States of America. It's a check and balance. But there are situations in the election code, and I think some of it is just developed over time, where I'm not sure that's happening enough. And I think in running by ballot design, the post-election audit, all sorts of things in the weeks before the election and afterwards, I think having the state more involved, particularly our office, because I'm the Secretary of State as the chief election official, I think it would more clearly be in alignment with that aspirational goal at the start of the Title 22, the election code, which is to have that check and balance. And so I think that's one of the themes we're going to work on in this 25 session. I have a lot of different points of emphasis in terms of improving the election code, but one of the big themes I think is in that, and in having the election code in alignment with that goal at the beginning. So,
And Mr. Chairman, may I?
Go ahead,
Just-
Parker.
I think to the point of Treasurer Meyer's question, I think the question underlying is, did we learn a lesson in this? And did we learn something that we can go forward and prevent in the future? And sometimes the best lessons are those you learn the hard way. And I'm here to tell you, we learned this one the hard way. And so we've learned from it. We will certainly make sure there is something in place to ensure it does not happen again.
Okay, well, thank you, Clerk
Thank you.
Irvin. Thank you. Okay, in the room, I'm gonna count to 5 in a moment, and then we'll kind of move to the Zoom. Any further in the room? Going once, going twice, going 3 times, going 4 times, and going 5 times. Okay, we are now going to proceed over to the Zoom. Everybody should have been let into the waiting room. If you wish to comment, you are to please raise your hand if you have not done so already. You still have time, don't worry. But Mr. Fafi, do you want to go ahead and read off? I think we're just going to do it in order of those that have raised their hands, as Zoom sort of orders in the order in which the hand is raised. So, okay, Ms. Kaufman, go ahead. Please unmute yourself, and there she is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to the public on this, and I commend you guys for the thoroughness that you have done so far of what I've been listening to today. I'm very encouraged by that. I wrote a few things down that I think we also need to take into account before we certify this election today. And if I may, I just read it from a list. One of them is that we have an outdated antivirus on our election voting systems. They have not been updated since before 2022, and that is according to the EAC website. That is also according to our Title 2211-103 DII. It says proof that election voting systems must meet the voluntary voting system guidelines adopted by the United States EAC Commission. Another one is we have the Windows software that is outdated, that has not been updated since before 2022 as well. And that's the same title that applies to that. And with that, I had obtained public records from the SOS department that talks about the engineering change order of 1141, which should have taken place in 2023. But according to an email from Lori Mommaerts, please forgive me for not attempting that. She stated on July 31st that they basically had dropped the ball and they should have followed up on it. So we are sitting here with none of that an engineering change order being updated. We've had cybersecurity experts Rick Weibel and Clay Parikh come and talking with lots of people in the area, and also with the Clerks Association and you, Chuck, as well, to let you aware of all these voting challenges and system challenges that we have. And we appreciate that opportunity and hope that you please, I guess, take heed to some of that. We also know that our primary logic and accuracy testing was abysmal, and confirming that was that you called for everyone to retest again in the county's situation, but unfortunately they still didn't pass on these logic and accuracy testing. Now, I received the logic and accuracy testings both through the primary and through the general, and the general was just as bad. And so they did not pass. And a lot of these challenges that we're seeing could have been avoided if those testings were done correctly and according to statutes. I encourage that to be thoroughly looked at. We have a wake-up call in Weston County because what we're finding initially is that there was a cover-up and a misdirection. That is not acceptable. We need to have clarity with our clerks and our elected officials of what actually is going on. We believe that this also, with the hand counting resolution of the county in Weston, that fell under the statute 22-11-107, where it says that they could use an alternate method for counting. And I appreciate all of your work and effort in that situation, Mr. SOS. I appreciate that. Our statutes also say we should follow the voluntary voting guidelines. And again, when we had the error that was reported to you by our clerk, Malcolm, and I appreciate him for doing that. But in our EAC certificate or certification, it says that there's only one error allowed in 1.5 million ovals filled out. And that is not according to me, that is according to the EAC certification. So with just one Platte County error, all these other ones are beyond. So we have challenges with that and it needs to be addressed. Our statutes also say we must keep secrecy in casting our ballot, but it does not say we have to keep secrecy in counting our non-identifiable ballots. I encourage every one of you and to absolutely, I guess I encourage you all to maybe suspend this election certification to maybe do a hand counting of the whole state, because there have been so many vulnerabilities, so many things, anomalies that have been going on via whether it's human, via whether it's mechanical, whatever. And I encourage you to do at least investigate the elections that we have. I also want to encourage everyone of you guys to please follow the statutes. We encourage you to do that. And with our election systems, they give the vulnerabilities to the believing that our votes are being cast as we cast them. There are many people that are disenfranchised by a lot of these anomalies that they're seeing. So anyway, that is what I've come to say, and I appreciate all of you and your work, and I hope and encourage that you do take time to maybe suspend and look at maybe hand counting multiple races to just reaffirm that our machines were acting accordingly and correct with the EAC guidelines based on being vulnerable and not up to date according to the guidelines. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ms. Kaufman. And a couple things I do want to respond to on that. Appreciate your passion, Ms. Kaufman, and our continued conversations on these issues. I want to tell you, I think looking at hand audits, hand examination of the ballots is something that is one of the big lessons from the Weston experience, continuing to improve on tabulation. But I do want to push back a little bit on a couple things that were said there and clarify a couple things. One, on the updates on the software on the machines. And I really do appreciate that Ms. Kaufman and a number of different individuals from around the state approached our office, I believe it was in June, on some concerns on the updating of the antivirus and some of the software on the machines and the timing of that. We did reach out to the vendor on that. They initially, it's one of those things you kind of move up the food chain. There was an initial email from the salesperson that said that the timing of that possibly had not occurred properly. But then as we moved up the food chain on this, what ended up happening is the update got rolled into what was called ECO 1141, which was in May of 2023. And that was the update EVS 6.0.6.0. That update got rolled into ECO 1141, which occurred in 2023, May of 2023. So the salesperson, the Lori Momert's email that you referred to, which was received, I believe, in July. I remember very distinctly when I got that. I was on the way back from Rock Springs from a corporations meeting. There was then an email after that, a letter formally, which we forwarded to you. I forwarded that to you, I believe, on, it was August 21st. That letter was dated on August 13th. And so that clarified that that update was rolled into ECO 1141. And we also reached out to Pro V&V regarding your concerns on certification of the SysStore process of formatting the USBs, and they did go ahead and test that process and came back and sent a letter to us saying that that cleared all of their checks, the lab down there in Alabama, which the EAC is contracted with to look at these issues. So that email I sent to you was on August 27th, excuse me, and the first attachment is the ES&S letter from August 13th, which lays out all of your concerns that we had presented to the vendor and their responses to that. And then the second attachment is the EAC letter, which we received on August 21st, which addresses your concern on the certification of ballot on demand printer, that is not subject to EAC certification because ballot on demand is a separate process from the tabulation with the machines. And then the third is the Pro V&V letter, which is dated August 23rd, 2024, which was the examination from the lab in Huntsville, Alabama on the SysStore formatting issue and some of the concerns on that. So we took all of your concerns very seriously, and we went ahead and communicated with all of our vendors on those issues. And I would go ahead and redirect you to that email on August 27th, 2024. And I'll go ahead and forward that to you as well. Re-forward that. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on with public comment. Yes, go ahead, Treasurer Meyer.
Yeah, just one on updates. Was that both virus and the Windows software?
Yes, yes, Mr. Chairman. I mean, yes, Treasurer Meyer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes. And I'll just read off point 4 from the August 13th letter, which is point 4, ECO 1141. ES&S upgraded the Wyoming County's election management systems to EVS 6.0.6.0 in May of 2023, which included ECO 1141. So what it was ECO 1156. They rolled ECO 1141 into ECO 1156. That's how they handled it in Wyoming, and that occurred in May of 2023.
The ballot on demand, so it's not part of the EAC, but is there another, I guess, audit or some process where we keep track of the ballot on demands?
The ballot on demand is not EAC certified. So the ballot on demand process is when, if a county runs out of ballots on election night, right?
Yeah.
There's a process where they can print ballots if they run out. And so one of the allegations was that the printer, this Okidata C712 printer, Okidata, was not EAC certified, and that the computer that interacts with ballot on demand, the Dell Latitude 3500, was not EAC certified. It was not on the certification list. Well, we have this email, this letter from the EAC August 21st talking about that, and that's not subject to that. So,
Well, not being subject, it seems like it should, maybe we should look at it in the future to see, that we have.
well, that's federal.
certified-
That's
yeah,
federal.
that's
I
federal.
mean, the EAC,
Yeah.
hey, and I think with this new administration, maybe the EAC will look at that.
Yeah, I think we need, just for voting, I think you
Yeah,
need.
and just
you need one
reading
clear
from this,
standard.
it
Yeah.
says, as such, ballot on demands are not necessary to include in the certified configuration for the system.
Yeah. It seems like if you're gonna have everything that you know there's gonna be that works together, that the EAC should probably do a better job of certifying, probably printers and different things that are perfectly capable to do it, but just to make sure that there's not any, potential of some embedded software or something. Yeah. Thank you, Mr.
All right, thank you. All right, who is next? Rick. Mr. Martin, go ahead. Mr. Martin, could you unmute, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the State Canvassing Board, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Martin.
Thank you. Again, my name is Rick Martin, and I'm from Laramie, and I wanted to share a few positive things with you about our election and some areas for improvement. First of all, I'd like to recognize the Albany County Sheriff and the men and women of the Albany County Sheriff's Office. They should be commended for implementing an outstanding election day security plan. Almost every polling station had a street-clothed deputy that was very professional and helped set a tone of safety and security in what was a very stressful day for some. And I would hope that maybe the governor would consider recognizing that department, that office, and what they did. Many reported regular patrols by both the Laramie Police Department and the Albany County Sheriff's Office at all major polling locations. This includes a full Sheriff's Office escort of the majority of ballot boxes and equipment from the polling stations to the courthouse. I would also like to recognize the work of the Albany County Elections Division for allowing poll watchers and selecting party-approved election judges. This was the first year in quite some time the party was allowed a full slate of poll watchers and election judges at every polling station. This included allowing 2 poll watchers from each party at each location. This year, poll watchers were given a folding chair to sit on and allowed to sit 3 feet behind the poll books. This was unprecedented and greatly appreciated. I want to talk about some areas for improvement. The problems I'm about to share significantly added to the defeat of the challengers in both House District 13 and House District 14. The majority of the Laramie City precincts, we had a major problem with what I call voter suppression. Whether it was intended voter suppression or unintended, it must be addressed if we are going to have free and fair elections in the county of Albany. Approximately 3 years ago, the former Albany County Clerk asked the county commissioners to consolidate many precincts, making several small, manageable precincts into very large precincts that led to large lines of people that were not able to socially distance and otherwise would have been manageable. This was done under the reasoning of reducing the amount of ballots that the county clerk would have to prepare. The solution is for the county commissioners to work with the stakeholders, look at historical precincts, and come up with a new plan of manageable precincts that serve the needs of the people. An example is the University of Wyoming has no dedicated precinct. This caused super long lines at the Spring Creek School. My wife and I arrived at 7:05. 20 to 30 people left. We have got to address this. The governor may want to talk to President Seidel. An example, we were denied the right to pass out Senator Crumb's rack card during the homecoming parade. But there's got to be a way to negotiate to get a precinct at the university. The voter suppression was also caused by the new use of electronic poll books. As expected, e-poll books were slow due to network problems. We had multiple reports from our election judges of software crashes, printers not working, which caused an hour-and-a-half delay at Spring Creek and other polling locations. And I want to assert the shark tag printers that were totally unnecessary, added to the slow-moving lines, and as added to unnecessary steps to obtain and process a ballot. Another major blunder that added even more time to the process of voting was the fact that all voters were required to process through one line to be confirmed to vote. Registered voters were required to wait for voters that had to make address changes and citizens that had to register to vote. The problem I just reported caused an average time to get through the line to cast a ballot was 45 minutes to 2 hours. It can be easily corrected by having a separate table to process address changes and new registrants. This is simply unacceptable and must be addressed by the county. A good idea would be to perform a case study on each step of the process of both paper poll books versus e-poll books. Lastly, we have a major problem in Albany County with a large number of people that have moved out of the election districts requesting absentee ballots. In the majority of these cases, these ballots are returned and processed even though the person no longer lives in the election district. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman and members of the Canvassing Board, the voter suppression and the large number of questionable absentee ballots that were cast and counted most likely led to the defeat of both challengers in House District 13 and House District 14. This is my recommendation. Albany County is not even able to pay the medical bills of our county jail inmates. We are struggling financially. On top of that, the sheriff's office, the district attorney, and the attorney general have no dedicated funds to investigate election crimes. I would ask the governor to make note to seriously look at recommending a supplemental budget increase of $100,000 for both of the 23 counties, sheriff's office, and the district attorney's offices, which would be a $200,000 earmark for investigation and trial of election crimes. The governor should also work to add a supplemental increase for this type of funding for the Attorney General's office. Number two, the legislature must pass laws to make it clear that drop boxes are not allowed in Wyoming. We also need to work to have a law that mandates that every voter be required to meet the same standard to obtain a library card, show a current Wyoming ID to include a utility bill to prove residency. In closing, Mr. Chairman and members of the Canvassing Board, I thank you for taking a moment to review my ideas, and I appreciate ideas and suggestions as together we strive to improve the Wyoming voting process. My name is Rick Martin. I am the co-chairman of the Wyoming Republican Party Election Integrity and Security Committee. My phone number is 307-223-1007, and I would look forward to being part of a movement for improvement. Thank you for your time, and thank you for serving in the great state of Wyoming. I end my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any questions? Any questions? Treasurer Meyer.
Just comment, I think that there are some problems possibly in that area, so I hope your office can move to do something with it, in statutory or otherwise.
Oh, I'd love to. The challenge is getting it through the process and overcoming the veto pen and we had a lot of things we tried to do in 23 that didn't go through, but we're going to keep working it. We're going to do 20 hours a day. I mean, anything we can do to advance the ball. We're going to work hard in this 25 session. At least 20 hours a day. All right. Any other questions? Who's up next? Mr. Fafi. Elena Campbell. Miss Campbell, Sheridan County.
Hello.
How are things up there?
Doing very well, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very
Yes.
much. And
Thank you.
executives today. Thanks for having me. I'll be brief. And it's more from the 50,000-foot view. A lot of distrust about the elections in general around the United States and also in our own state. We don't look at source code. That's a problem. We have no idea how these electronics are behaving behind the scenes. We're not allowed to look at it. It's all programmed by third-party individuals outside our state. There's portable and self-executing code. We don't know about remote access. We're told there's no modem connection. We don't know about smart devices because we have motherboards produced in China down inside the machines. We're not allowed to look at those. So it's furthermore, our state constitution says our elections are to be open. That's the exact language used. Open is transparent. Currently, when you're running ballots through a machine where we can't inspect any of this stuff, that is opaque. These are black boxes. The whole process is opaque. So a simple solution, certainly the gold standard, would be to get rid of them entirely. Just get rid of the machines. Let us go back to the way we did it for 200 years and hand count around our state. A fallback position is, at the very least, there's got to be some proper audits, canvassing at the end of every election. Select a few precincts at random. Let us do some hand counts. Look at those precincts. Let's make sure that they reconcile properly with what those opaque machines are doing. I think that you'll see a lot of this distrust going away if we can get some legislation like that through. So we're looking at Title 22 to present, and hope that we'll see a lot of support for that. I thank you very much today. You guys have a wonderful day.
Well, and thank you, Ms. Campbell. A couple responses, and I really appreciate your comments. I think that one of the lessons from the Weston County experience, I mean, we've heard many different actors say hand counting can't be done, all these arguments that it just can't happen. And we've heard it again and again. Well, it was done in a matter of 24 hours in Weston County, the procedure for that, and it was completed within 4 hours in that Weston County Canvassing Board. So
Yes, sir. May I add, please? May I add, please, that
yeah, go
indeed
ahead, Ms. Campbell. Yes.
we do have a great number of people all trained up in hand counts around the state. We're ready to go.
Well,
We're ready to assist you. We have the tally sheets and the spreadsheets for those. We are absolutely ready to assist.
Well, and I think, Ms. Campbell, the other, I think, lesson from the Weston County experience is in debunking a lot of false things that have been said on the AG opinion, which preceded my time in office, on hand counting and the interaction with the Constitution on that. And it's very important to note that AG decision is limited. What they discussed was a third party receiving those ballots and conducting that examination on their own. Not what we had in Weston County, which is hand count at a public meeting with the canvassing board. And that, I mean, we talked to the AG about that. That is clearly allowed and is a very different situation from the AG opinion that was issued in 2022. And the fact that the media, there's been a lot of looseness in the characterization on what that opinion dealt with has been very frustrating to me, because that opinion was limited to certain situations, which was very different from what we had in Weston County and some of the proposals that are out there. And that was confirmed in our communication with the Attorney General in the days after the election last week, as we discussed paths forward in Weston County. Thank you. Any other questions? Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, who's next up? Mr. Fafi? Okay, Ms. Sears, go ahead. Ms. Sears, if you could unmute. Yeah, I saw her there earlier. The video's on and everything? Okay. Just hold on a second, okay? What are you proposing? Go ahead and turn on your mic, Treasurer Meyer.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, we're probably going to move forward with the certification, but I'm particularly interested in people who don't want to see it certified to see whether we have any reason to not move forward. With
Yeah, we're going to
certification.
hear from everybody pursuant to the agenda. So, Ms. Sears, thank you. We are still not hearing from you. So, Ms. Sears, what we're going to do, don't be alarmed. We're going to keep going. Let's keep working on it. There's the call-in line there. If you need to, just take your cell phone, and you know how to do this, I'm sure, on Zoom. You call in, and that's the ultimate backup, and you can do the audio over your phone. How many more hands do we have up? Okay, who's next up? Miss Love.
Yeah,
Weston County, how's everything going?
can you
up
hear
there?
me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yes.
I am actually part of the Weston County experience, and I'd like to thank Governor Gordon, Secretary Gray, and the members of the canvassing board to hear me out today. Thank you for your sincere attention and allowing me this time. I live in Weston County. I've lived here for 24 years, and most of my family lives here. And I just want to relay this about testing and what happened on election day. Testing the ballot machines consists of a test deck of ballots provided by ES&S, put through hardware leased and purchased from ES&S, and tabulated on software coded by ES&S. The logic and accuracy test is developed to protect against typos, programming, coding errors, and to ensure that we see no ties or zeros. So when we're testing is to prove that the votes are not being erased or flipped. This test is completely self-contained. At no time are the ballots from the actual election used. We only use the test ballots. So the ballots from the actual election are not used. Only the ones that come in the little test deck. We've never checked any ballots against any results. Without a hand and eyes comparison of the ballots that went through the machine, the test has no control. And without any control, the test is mute. We're running the ballots through the machine, and we're taking those numbers and comparing them to a piece of paper that ES&S sent, but we're never comparing them to like a hand count to the ballots we just stuck through it. And that's at the test level. The mistakes that occurred in Weston County on November 5th it was a comedy of errors. Sloppiness in ordering ballots caused a glaring miscalculation in the HD1 Chip Nyman race. These were not machine mistakes. They were caused by our county clerk. However, if surveillance by the Secretary of State had not forced the Nyman race to be investigated by ES&S, we would have never found the mistakes in the county commissioner's race. This begs the question of how many times in the past have mistakes happened that we didn't find. This was a forced audit. So then they looked over at the county commissioner race and they saw that. We will not know because we don't have any I don't have any confidence in our past races now because we've never been forced to look at them. Our county commissioner race changed by 62 votes. And this would not have been discovered by machine testing or this would not have been discovered by machine testing without a hand count comparison. You cannot rely on the post audit or the CVR. Obviously, it didn't work the first time. We did this audit twice after in the canvassing. So that's not giving me confidence either. I would like to state that if you certify this election, knowing that one county found flipped votes and no other counties have been checked by hand, that you're damaging the integrity of Wyoming elections. And I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ms. Love. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Love. Hope everything's going well up there. Next hand raised, Mr. Foffey. let's provide some more time to sort that out. What's the next one? Okay. Pat or Pam? Pam Gualtieri. Okay, Ms. Gualtieri? Go ahead and unmute, and if you could turn on your video. Also, is this still, other than Ms. Sears, the last hand raised? Okay, if you're in the waiting room and you have not commented, now is the time to raise your hand, again, if you wish to, because we are on the last commenter that has raised their hand after Ms. Gualtieri. Ms. Gualtieri. Go ahead.
Hello. Okay. Well, first I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to all of us citizens. I represent Newcastle, Wyoming, which is in Weston County, as the proud mayor. But I'm asking, I agree with everyone who spoke before me. I couldn't say it any better than they have. But I do ask that you don't go forward with officiating this election, as there is so many errors, especially in Weston County, not just off by 1 or 2 votes, but off by a lot, 60 plus with our commissioners. And you know what happened with our House District number 1. You made a comment about how they were able to hand count within a short time frame, but they did not hand count all of the ballots. They only counted 2 races, and that was commissioners and the House District 1. I have a lot of incoming candidates that were elected who now question if they should or should not be taking their seat because they don't know if the counts were off in their section, our school board, city council, et cetera. And as you know, Secretary, you were part of the issue here. Newsletter Journal did an excellent job videoing the canvassing board. And if you watch that, you can see that due diligence wasn't done there either. They're not listening to the citizens in our county. And as the mayor, it's my job to take care of them. And we would like to see Weston County hand counted by another county, not ours.
Well, thank you, Ms. Gualtieri. One thing I do want to clarify is this board, if the motion that might be before the board in a few moments is for state races that interact with the state. So legislative races, statewide races, the ballot proposition, presidential, Senate, Congress, the city council and the school board is certified by the county canvass. And I understand you were making points in regards to the races that are certified by the state canvassing board as well, but I did want to clarify that.
Yes, I am aware of that. But when we have a city clerk that has not done her due diligence for this election, past elections, we can't go back to the primaries to even see if some of those candidates should have been on our general election. So there's a lot of concern in our community and with our residents that don't know if their voice was heard or their votes counted. And I think that's a huge concern for down the road for future voting.
Well, thank you, Ms. Gualtieri. Thank you. I look forward to meeting you. I don't think we've ever met before, so look forward to meeting you.
No, I would love to meet you. Thank you.
Any other questions, by the way? Sorry. Treasurer, do you have a question?
No, I was just trying to figure out what that percentage, 62 of the total
Right.
Weston County votes.
Yeah.
So I got a little more tabulation
Gotcha.
too.
Gotcha. Any questions over here? Comments? Thank you, Ms. Gualtieri. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is Ms. Sears, let's go ahead and try Ms. Sears again. And again, if anyone wishes to comment, please raise your hand. Now is the time to do so, where it looks like we're concluding we're getting pretty close to the conclusion of the virtual comment. Okay. Okay. Any other individuals that have their hands raised? No. Okay. Going once, going twice, going 3 times, going 4 times. Raise your hand if you'd like to comment, going 5 times. No hands raised? Okay, that is the virtual public comment. Anyone in the room? Try one more time. Okay, with that, we will go ahead and close the first round of public comment. After any board action, there may very well be, there would be another round of public comment pursuant to the agenda. With that, this in the agenda is the time for any board action. At this time, I will entertain any motion.
Mr. Chairman, just a question. Typically, I think we've seen a recommendation from the Secretary of State's office and a, I mean, I can make a motion. I just want to.
Yeah, Mr. Foffey, where did we put that? It's in there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot of pages.
Mr. Chairman, I got a couple of general questions that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just, what was that number of mail-in ballots? You said over 100,000, but I wanted to get the.
You know, we get that release up.
I can read it to you again.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Treasurer.
Go ahead, Director Young.
Let me find it here for you, sir. One
Because we
second.
didn't get any write-in ballots that were tabulated differently. It might be interesting to have another column in our report that had write-in versus at the polling place or polling day.
So, Mr. Treasurer, as of election morning, so November 5th, 45% of voters, registered voters had returned their absentee ballot. The total absentee ballots requested was 118,959.
And Mr. Chairman, I know when I voted absentee, and that was a while ago, to get an absentee ballot, you actually had to show up at the courthouse, and they'd go through the registration book, and they'd check your residency and make sure who you were, so they gave you the right ballot, because every ballot in the county was a little different. And then they would check you off as having voted, so you couldn't vote at the polls. And I didn't know what that was a fairly comprehensive, I think, way to do it without any ability to have people that were outside of a residency or something, you know, being able to vote like they did necessarily in Albany County. And so do you just call up the county clerk and say, mail me one now? Or how's it work?
Well, Treasurer Meyer, every absentee ballot is cross-checked with a voter's registration.
Yeah.
If you wish to vote by mail and you are a registered voter, you can call the county clerk and receive that absentee ballot by mail. Now, in terms of your concerns on proof of residency, we're with you. We had a rulemaking to require a proof of residency for registering to vote. That rulemaking we issued here at the conclusion of 2023 and unfortunately was vetoed by the governor in, I believe, March of 2024. It may have been April, beginning of April. It was right after the session. I believe it was March.
Yeah, I guess there's
I don't know,
something
do you
else.
remember?
And I'm not sure
I
whether
think it was
this would
March, yeah.
be, you know, it's probably not your office or my office. It might be more in the governor's office, but or the legislators, is that looking at some of these different things where you have this constitutional amendment that's now passed, and that has to do with the definition of a resident. And there's a lot of jurisdictions, and I think even in Wyoming now, that's being done in Teton County, that you can have an LLC. And then you have somebody buys the shares of the LLC, and the only thing property in the LLC is the house and the property. And so essentially, you never get a step up in taxation because the LLC is treated as a real person or as a person. And so I guess if we're going to keep people from gaming the system, otherwise everybody that has a house is going to be a primary resident, whether they're a corporation or any contrived, you know, statutory representation of a person. So I guess my thought is that maybe there should be a definition that a resident is a real person. not necessarily a contrived statutory representation of a person. So for a primary residence, because that could be a way that people would essentially lock in the value of their house for 1,000 years through a trust.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah,
I
well, you
have
got
to
some
think
interesting
it's-
tax
yeah.
issues interacting with your comments, Mr. Chairman, and I think
yeah.
that's something certainly to examine and thinking about after-action bills from, possibly from the legislature
Right.
in light of
Yeah.
the constitutional amendments.
Yeah, as those bills move through, I
But,
think that's
but
something if you're there.
well,
that
hold on
you
one
need
second,
to-
Treasurer Meyer, okay? In terms of definition of a qualified elector for registering to vote, Wyoming state law is very clear that you need to be a person to register to vote. It's very clear that you need to be a person to be a candidate. This came up in Cheyenne when an AI candidate was put forward. And yes, he claimed that whatever, there was a person behind it, but
Right, yeah.
Wyoming state law is very clear that you need to be a person to register to vote and to be a candidate, and that's in the definition of qualified elector. Now, I think you're getting into some tax stuff, and it's interesting, Treasurer Meyer, and I think in thinking about SF 54 exemption bills, defining residency, it's interesting, but I think that might not be pertaining too much to
Yeah,
what we're.
and that's why I started, I don't know whose thing it
Yeah.
is, but it was
Okay.
something that was on the, I think it was a certification, so that's why I brought it up.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
well.
Mr. Chairman, just, I wanted to add one
Go
quick
ahead.
point of clarification, just to you, Mr. Treasurer, on the absentee numbers. That does include ballots that would have been mailed in as well as in-person absentee voting, because a lot of folks just view early voting as a separate thing, but it is treated as absentee. So I just wanted to add that quick clarification.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it'd be good to have those two broke up, because absentee in person, I don't think there's any possibility of what was alleged in Laramie County or Albany County to occur, but.
Well,
mail-in.
Mr. Chairman, it
You never
goes,
can tell in Albany
it's
County.
interesting because
Yeah.
a little of that construction goes back to the Constitution, right? Because the Constitution says that the methods of voting are in person and then by absentee. So when the legislature created in-person early voting, they defined it as also being absentee voting in person in order to possibly survive a constitutional challenge. But so that's a little bit of the
I guess I'm ready
legislative
for
history.
the
Okay,
auditor's
well,
vote.
hold on, Treasurer Meyer, I'm chairing this meeting. Any other comments? Is there a motion? Is there a motion? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman? Just a quick question. I'm just saying
Yes.
this out loud. It is your recommendation that we certify the official state canvas.
Yep, that
Mr.
paper is there.
Mr. Chairman, I would make the motion that this board certify the statewide abstract as the official state canvas.
Is there a second? That motion has been made by Auditor Racinas. It has been seconded by Treasurer Meyer. We are going to head and do a recorded vote. Governor Gordon, what is, any discussion, excuse me, before we proceed to the vote, any discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I just want to thank you for clarifying Weston County's local votes that's a different canvassing board, and I appreciate your clarification on that, so thank you for that.
Yes. And before we proceed to the vote, any further discussion? I want to make sure any further discussion? Not seeing any. Let's go ahead and proceed to the vote. I do want to do a recorded vote. Governor Gordon.
Aye.
Governor Gordon has cast an aye vote. Auditor Racinas.
Aye.
Auditor Racinas has cast an aye vote. Treasurer Meyer.
Aye.
Treasurer Meyer has cast an aye vote. And I, the Secretary of State, will be casting an aye vote. So that is 4 ayes. The motion passes. 4 ayes, the motion passes. Okay. We continue to proceed through the agenda. We are now at point 4, further public comment. We will have the same procedure. Everybody is in the waiting room, correct? Have you seen any other registrations, Mr. Faffi? Everyone is in the meeting. Okay. And you're getting emails on any new registrations, correct, in real time? Okay. Well, let's go ahead and start in the room. I see Ms. Russell proceeding to the podium. Great to have you here, Ms. Russell. Thank you. And again, if you are in the Zoom room and you wish to publicly comment, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary and members of the board. I am here in two capacities. Number one, as a resident of Cheyenne and a member of the, I've been an election judge here in Laramie County, and I recently had the great honor, and it was great fun, observing the absentee ballot count. I was there from 9 o'clock in the morning till 11:30 at night, so I stayed through the whole thing, and it was an incredible exercise. I'm also going to speak as the executive director of the Wyoming Republican Party to share some things that I have heard with you. Number one, I want to commend everyone who's been involved, from citizens through legislators, through you all on the board, for the great advances we've made in election integrity and security since 2018. As many of you know, in 2018, a 35-year injunction was lifted on the RNC to allow observation of voting procedures. We had been prohibited, the RNC and Republicans in general had been prohibited from observing. When those observations got back into place in full in 2020, many things became very apparent of issues that had arisen through either mythology, process, or just plain habit of doing things that really put Republicans at a disadvantage. And we saw this in excluding Republicans from observing elections, election processes, any part of it. This was the 2022 and now the 2024. There have been advances in leaps and bounds. However, I think there has been a habit to declare that everything's great and there's little room for improvement. What I hear as the executive director and sort of a point person, just because I'm in the office and I'm the one available, is that people do not operate in a vacuum. They have friends, family, neighbors, they themselves know of issues. And so to have their concerns dismissed gives a real disservice to our citizens. They are not unknowledgeable, and they are not without valid opinions on things that can improve. I will tell you of one experience I had just a couple of weeks ago of a man who came into the office who was an observer at in Laramie County. He said he personally observed a bundle of ballots come in. He said it was probably 18 or 20, came in together from the same address. He brought it to the attention of the supervisor at that location. It was taken to the county clerk. I cannot tell you who the county clerk was at the time. And the county clerk said, let them go through. If issues come up and they are not investigated, what that does is introduce doubt. And that doubt is spread. I can assure you, I am not the only person he shared that with. I have heard firsthand and secondhand of many issues, everywhere from voting multiple times, voting in multiple locations, ballots being delivered, multiple ballots being delivered, people being guided through the ballot process who are in group homes or rest homes. There are all sorts of issues. No process is without error. And so the harder we work to assure election integrity, the better the trust, the efforts, our efforts to restore trust will be. And we're certainly on the right track in this state. As you all know, election integrity is a #1 issue for us, primarily because of the 35-year exclusion from the process and all the laws, all the policies, all the procedures that were put in place. It will remain a top issue for the Republican Party. On a personal note, I was incredibly impressed with the workers at the Laramie County absentee ballot counting. there were about 55 people, staff and volunteers who were involved, and I saw without exception, attention to detail, attention to the process, attention to following the rules. Our county clerk has put in a rule book, actually with the aid of her number 2, Dale Davis, I believe is his name. And I saw people following that to the T. Dale Davis, her number 2, I was the only observer there. I went to observe for the county party, the county Republican Party. There was no other observer there from the opposing party or another party. Mr. Davis came and explained each of the ballot issues that came up. He explained, here's the issue, here's what we're doing to resolve it. He made every effort to keep me informed as an observer. I watched all the resolution processes. I attended the canvassing board. What I saw, and I've also worked as an election judge. So I've seen the process from start to finish, and I am impressed with the efforts that are being made. However, we have a long ways to go. We still have a black box in the machines. And the last speaker brought up an issue that has been brought up. We are not checking ballots, actual ballots, against what is recorded. That's a big hole. What we have is numbers. 10 ballots were cast, 10 ballots were voted. That's an issue. And people have brought that up over and over. It's a black box. The other black box is the mailbox. The first time I saw a mailbox was on the University of Colorado campus. I saw green boxes and I asked somebody, what are those? They look like mailbox. Those were ballot boxes. And they were all over campus. There was no camera on them, nothing. We have some guards in the cameras that are on our ballot boxes, but I can tell you that that is a huge issue for many, many people in the state. It is a box. There's nothing secure about it. I don't care about the cameras you have on it. You don't know who's putting it in there. The other issue is, that is a big one, is residents, and another one is, are you checking the signature on the registration against the signature on the oath? How do you know you've got the same person filling that out? So those are just some of the things that I want to bring up. I really do appreciate and have seen our process grow by leaps and bounds, but there's still work to do. And without certain work being done on certain of those big issues, distrust will remain. So thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Treasurer, I think you have a question?
On those things where you've got a stack that comes in that might have been from, derived from who knows where. You think those should be set aside to the end of the night and put in a provisional pile? And then at the end of the night, those are the only ballots that are left. And so those are, I guess, maybe at this point in time, that would at least be someplace where you absolutely should, I think you should have hand ballot counting if you have something that's suspicious. But anyway, I think they have to be segregated so you can pay particular attention against them. And that might be a way to check out your machines too with real ballots, is at the end of the night on provisional ballots.
Mr. Treasurer, I would absolutely agree. And in fact, in Laramie County, that's part of the rule book, that if I saw that happen, I saw it happen. 2 ballots came in one envelope from overseas. And it was flagged as being, we were going to have to verify that, and that's what was done with that. The scenario that I presented would be no different. You've got 18 ballots coming in, bundled together. It sounded like a rubber band, something like that. Maybe it came in from a nursing home. Who knows where it came from, but it should have been flagged and then verified. But at that time, it went ahead and went through. That was not done, but absolutely. And perhaps that could be a requirement for the counties to have a rule book for processing, and that there be duplication on every single process. One thing I did observe is in the running of the ballots through the DS 450, There were not, at one of the machines, there were 2 machines used. And I apologize if this looks like a criticism. This is not what I'm meaning at all. It was just an observation. One of the DS-450s had 2 people watching what was happening. The other one did not. And the other one did have a problem. And people came over and were resolving it. But at every stage, there were 3 people except at the machines. One of them had 2, one of them had 1. And so that's just an example. Like I said, overall, what I saw, what I observed in Laramie County was impressive. I was very, very impressed with the knowledge, the dedication, and the thoroughness that people did.
Well, thank you, Ms. Russell. You have a follow-up, Treasurer Meyer?
Just a follow-up, I think you probably heard the testimony from Albany County and the assertion that maybe those races actually had enough voter suppression to actually make a difference. And I look at some of those numbers. That means like 200 in a House race that people were suppressed. That's a serious representation. I hope that you'd have a little bit of time, or the party would let you have a little bit of time to really delve into that, because of all the different things that showed up this particular day, that's the only one that may have a material difference. And I think that's going to be our poster child, I think, on how to maybe change something that perhaps has serious ramifications.
Ms. Russell,
Thank you.
go ahead. You have any comments on that? In response?
There are certain things that come up over and over and over, county to county. They need to be taken seriously, and they need to be explored. I personally have testified on these issues before. I testified against taking in the DS-450 and the electronic systems, because what they were, when you talk about the certification looks like a catch-22. You can't come to a resolution because we don't know what's in the code. We don't know who's controlling the code. We don't know what's in it. I was poo-pooed at a committee hearing that I wasn't intelligent, I didn't know enough to comment on it. Anybody who has worked for a larger company that has protocols in place for what servers you can use, what protocols you have to retain, what emails you can use, what email service to do business. This is just common sense. And we have to understand, if somebody is taking the time to come to a committee hearing or come to a county clerk and presented an issue, that they need to be listened to and it needs to be addressed. I'll give you another example of personal experience. My sister has been an election judge in Maricopa County for 30 years, very hotly contested. She was an election supervisor last year in one of the districts in Scottsdale, where they had 7 people in her location alone, cases where identity was stolen. Somebody came in to vote and their vote had already been cast. One of them was a staff member for one of the gubernatorial candidates. Their identity was stolen. This year, she was a troubleshooter at 4 locations. And again, the problems are very widespread. Part of it is culture, part of it is equipment. The ballots going through the machines is recurring over and over and over. What do you do if you have a ballot that can't be run? You've got them all printed. Are you going to reprint them? Does that person not get to vote? That is a recurring issue across the nation. So there are certain things that we know are happening, and we're not immune. We just heard, we've got issues that we're seeing repeated in Arizona, Georgia, New York, Pennsylvania. We got ballots appearing. We need to listen, and we need to address them. We need to take people seriously when they bring issues in.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Ms. Russell. Thank you. And one thing I want to note, when these situations happen, it's very important that people reach out and report them. We have an election complaint form on our website. I've given out my cell a lot of times, 307-251-1372, 307-251-1372. On election day, every minute that passes after something is identified that we don't get a report on it, it's much more difficult to handle the issue. And so I just really want to emphasize that to people. And that's one of the reasons why the communication with the clerks is so important. I mean, I have a full list of all their cells. And, you know, when I wasn't able to get a hold of Clerk Hadlock in Tuesday evening, I mean, luckily I had the sheriff's cell. That's one of the counties where I had the sheriff's cell. And you know, in that way, I think there was a providential deal because the sheriff was able to get the county clerk on the phone so we could begin to address this issue. But it's very important we have that communication. Ms. Russell.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. I do want to emphasize something. I've been the executive director for 6 years, over 6 years now. So I've seen several of these elections go on. From the very beginning, when issues come up, I say, go to your county clerk. Have you taken this to the Secretary of State? When I first started, there was a great reluctance to go because of the issue that when they brought other things up, they were dismissed. What I have seen over that time is there's increasing willingness to go to the county clerk and the Secretary of State. So we're making progress, but there's more to be done.
Yes, and state law, Title 22 has a procedure for both. You can go to either, you can go to both. And so we take those complaints very seriously. You know, I do think in terms of forwarding things before our office, I mean, strengthening our communication with the AG, I think that's something we need to continue to work on because Title 22, the procedure when there's a complaint is that can be forwarded to the Attorney General. I do not prosecute the election code violations. I'm here and the election code lays out that I'm here to provide for uniformity in the election code, but it does not provide the authority for our office to prosecute election code violations, and that is with the Attorney General or the county attorneys, respectively, depending on the nature of the violation, and those can be forwarded from the Secretary of State or the county clerks, depending on the situation. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Lewis. Oh, okay. I thought you were coming up to comment. Anybody else in the room? You know, one thing I did not do earlier, I want to recognize, I neglected to do this. We have Mr. Apollo also in the room. I did not introduce him. He is in our elections division. Apologize, I missed you. Mr. Apollo has been prolific on signature verification on the initiatives that have come through. We are looking at an initiative which would be the first one if it goes to completion in the state of Wyoming since I believe mid-90s. And so that is proceeding through our office. There was a second filing the Friday before the election on that property tax initiative, and that begins a new 60-day period for us to evaluate those signatures and to see if on top of submission one, if that reaches the required threshold, in which case it would be placed on the 2026 general election ballot. So the turning in of that second submittal the Friday before the election begins a new 60-day period for evaluation by the Wyoming Secretary of State's office. Director Young.
Just wanted to clarify, it was actually the Monday before the election, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes. Scheduled for the Friday and it happened on the Monday. Thank you. Okay. And we've been in communication with the Attorney General because that second submission, and there's a lot of Supreme Court precedent on this, because it was submitted before the general election, the threshold will be the 2022 threshold, not the 2024 threshold. And there's Supreme Court precedent on this, Kathy Carpin case on this, and we've also been in communication with the Attorney General on this. So that is proceeding. We also have Carmen Potts, who's here in our compliance division, and she also helped on election night. We have a lot of inter-division help in the Wyoming Secretary of State's office on election night and in the lead up to election. We have a culture of that. I mean, we do, just in our business division, we do 75% of the work that Delaware has in terms of our filings, with 10% of the of the staff that Delaware has, and that's because we're really lean and we're efficient. We have interdivision help that helps us with that. All right, continuing with public comment in the room. Any other public comment in the room? Going once, going twice, going 3 times, going 4 times, going 5 times. Public comment in the room is passed. We will proceed now to the virtual. Have any hands been raised? Okay, Mr. Jasinski, Weston County, how's everything up there? If you could unmute your mic and turn on your video, please.
Thank you, Secretary Gray, for recognizing me,
Thank you.
and the rest of the canvassing board for allowing me to testify today. For the primaries in 2024 and the general election, I was an election judge. I was a monitor of both testing of the machines, and I was also there at the canvassing board audit or hand count. So I wanted to make some observations about the process that I experienced and witnessed, starting with the testing of the machines. The testing of machines was conducted at the last moment possible by Clerk Hadlock in opposition to requests to do it sooner. And waiting to the last minute, we went there, and during that testing, first irregularity was she stated that she did not have the test deck from ES&S machines. And so her and her county clerks tried to fill in ballots in as dictated by the program from E&S the best they could. This took at least 2 hours, maybe more, at which time they were in the county clerk's office with ballots spread all over the place, filling in ballots, which was a very bad optic if anybody was to go in there. Upon completing this and running the test failed. And because there were candidates who in the same race who got the same number of votes. So their solution to this was to fill in more ballots and try to overcome that. I, at one point, suggested the county clerk Hadlock that she call your office, Secretary of State Gray's office, for guidance on some other, on numerous other issues. She said, no, I'm not going to do that. I will call the County Clerks Association and get guidance from them. As the test went on, like I said, it just failed. And your office was notified as the results of that test. And it was by your encouragement, we got another test. But I believe it was only from your encouragement. Going to the second test, I was informed by Clerk Hadlock that guess what? We found the test ballots from the ES machines. How did they find these test ballots? By Clerk Hadlock's own words, having had a fit following the first test, upon return to her office, she started throwing things around, and one of the things she threw around was a packet of ballots, which opened up, and it was one of her other county clerks that observed that there was the test ballots after all. So that first day, almost 5 hours of an incompetent test, was a waste, and she had it, and so we ran the other test. In the initial test too, I want to say, we asked Clerk Hadlock if she was going to test the express voting machines. She said she was not. She said they're hardly ever used, so she did not test those express voting machines also. So and then everybody else has spoke about the anomalies on election night. So with the help of your office, there was a hand count at the canvassing board. At that meeting, many people from the public showed up and expressed their concerns to the canvassing board. I will say that at least this canvassing board is appointed by Clerk Hadlock, a member of the Republican Party and Democrat Party, but she is also a member of the canvassing board. And there was one member of the canvassing board that really was not open to this process. They treated the people there voicing their concerns with indifference. I'll say that as a polite word. And people spoke about that. And anyway, through the process, during that process of the hand counting, the Western County Republican Chair, Terry Jost, asked election judges to show up that day so we might help in this counting. And there was two, one from the Democratic Party and one from the Republican Party picked to assist, but there could have been many more hands used to make this a more efficient counting. But what County Clerk Hadlock did was she closed her office, which I don't think that was a correct way to deal with this, and had her clerks, assistant clerks, help in this hand counting. Some of these election judges were trained in hand counting. We had forms there, hand counting forms that would have made the process much more quicker, but that was denied. And then at that canvassing, we asked the canvassing board to do an audit of say 100 ballots. And actually, I think we asked that you just audit the election in Osage, which would be a smaller audit than the whole thing. And what happened was all they did was check 10 ballots on the forensic images. They checked for the presidential race. They checked for the state, for the Harriet Hagman's race, John Barrasso's race, and Chip Nyman's race. But they did not check any other races on those ballots. As other people have spoken, Mayor Terry and Susan Love, the confidence of the people of Weston County in this election process, due to the neglect and sometimes intentional impediment of the testing and the election monitoring by Clerk Hadlock, the trust and faith in this county for the election process is basically shot. There has to be a solution, and one of those solutions would be to remove County Clerk Hadlock from her position. This wasn't just an example of what she's done in 24. There's also been problems created by her in 2020 and 22 elections. This is a pattern that people in the county are aware of back in 2020, and they've seen it escalate. And last night, there was a meeting in Weston County of citizens concerned about what's happened. It was probably attended by 50 people throughout Weston County. And not one person voiced support for Clerk Hadlock in this process, but many expressed concern about the legitimacy of our elections here in Weston County. One of the greatest mandates that happened because of President Trump, or was given to President Trump in this last election, was election security. That's on the minds and foremost of everybody in Weston County, or the state of Wyoming, and the country. And I will say that these machines add to it. The ES&S, we use ES&S 200 machines. And so due to the incompetence of our county clerk, coordinated with the distrust for these machines, I'm sorry, it's just a fact, has led to the fact that nobody's going to trust an election here in Weston County unless there's some actions taken. And one of those would be, to start, would be to have Clerk Hadlock removed from our office. I appreciate you listening to me here today. I'll just end by saying, other than that, Weston County had a wonderful election. In the polling level, the judges, the chief judges did a great job. On election day, we registered between 233 people for either change of address or new registrations. I was at the registration desk at the judge, and I got to see parents bringing in their children for the first time that had reached voting age to register to vote, and I was part of that process. Before the election, we had 1,160 absentee votes banked, and I will say, and along that line, in the counting of those absentee ballots, on the day of that, Kurt Hadlock had a election judge from the Democratic Party there. She had no judge from the Republican Party there. And her comment was, well, there was a poll watcher there, so I just assumed they would act as a judge. That's not the way it's supposed to work. And that's not the way to instill confidence in our election. So I hope the Secretary of State's office and the governor's office, I'm asking you not to certify this election until we could have addressed a complete audit here in Weston County, at least, of the election. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jasinski. I think one of the things I wanted to address in your comments, I do think one of the statutes, and we're talking about checks and balances, and one of the statutes that we do need to look at is the appointment of the county canvassing board, and the fact that that the clerk is a member, and then also appointing those two other members, and it's any elector from each of the two parties. And that's what's supposed to be a check on that county process. I think that statute is one that we need to look at. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Mr. Jasinski. I hope everything's going well up there in Weston County.
Thank you, sir.
We are in Zoom for public comment right now. If you do not have your hand raised and wish to comment, please raise your hand. And I believe we had 3 total, so that means, is it 2 more? Okay. Right. So we got Representative Slagle up. It looks like we've got 2 more to go after that. Representative Slagle, great to see you.
Good morning, Secretary Gray. Good to see you guys. Thank you for doing this canvassing. I guess what I would say is, it looks to me with this situation up here in Weston County that we really have some issues that we need to be addressing in our legislative session that's coming up, especially in regard to when the Secretary of State or the county can request an audit of the ballots by hand count test machines, or possibly even totally do away with the machines, as was suggested earlier by the lady from Sheridan County. But I think we've definitely seen some negligence up here in Weston County by our clerk in some of the things she does. And the biggest one would be the denial of the mistakes were made until really pressured. But otherwise, I thought the election went well. I mean, because of our mistakes here in Weston County, though, I know there is growing distrust of our elections in Wyoming, even talking to people across the state when they hear about what happened in Weston County, they're like, well, my race might have gone wrong as well. So that's just what I wanted to share. I appreciate you guys looking at this stuff, and I hope we can get some legislation through this next session that will help correct these issues. Like you said, the appointment of the canvassing board for the local elections is important. And like was mentioned earlier, you know, your office doesn't look at the local elections. And so the local canvassing board is important there. And if the clerk's running that and says, well, we don't have a problem, then those elections don't get looked at, like the mayor of Newcastle was talking about earlier. So anyway, thank you for your time. I'd stand for any questions if you have any at this time.
Yeah, and thank you, Representative Slagle, for those comments. Really appreciate it. Any questions? Any questions, comments? Nothing? Okay, Representative Slagle, there was a lot of good comments there, and I'm so excited about this 2025 general session. I'm going to try to do 20 hours a day. I think I can
Okay.
do it. Cut it down to 4 hours of sleep, and I'm really excited about that. So I'm really excited about the session, and I think you brought up some good comments. We talked about the county canvassing board and the composition, but also should there be state interaction on those local races in terms of certification. I think possibly handing the composition may handle that issue to some extent, but that's another, I think, layer of the debate on that issue. So appreciate that comment as well, Representative
Yeah.
Slagle.
One additional comment on that, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Yeah, it would be the whole idea is the clerk's the one that prints all those ballots. And so, if we do have a problem like we did in Weston County this time, if we don't get somebody to look at even the local races on that, then that brings up more questions for the people involved there as well. So I mean, they are kind of related together where they're all printed on the same ballot.
Thank you, Representative Slagle. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Not seeing anything. Thank you. Hope everything's going well up there. Okay. We are in Zoom public comment. Okay, Ms. Sears is up. Thank you, Ms. Sears. I'm glad we were able to work out the technical difficulties. Go ahead, unmute and go ahead. Ah, darn it. All right, who's the next hand up? We'll go back. We'll try one more time.
Can you hear me?
Oh, is that Ms. Sears or is that Ms. Drost?
It is. Thank you so much for being so patient with my
Yes,
technically
Ms. Sears.
challenged self.
Go ahead, Ms. Sears. Thank you.
Well, I would just like to say today that since becoming a citizen in 2019, I have voted in 3 elections in Weston County. In all of those elections, serious errors were made by our county clerk. And now my dogs are barking. In 2020, she forgot to count an entire precinct and then called the race for the wrong candidate. In 2022, excuse me, she left a withdrawn candidate on the ballot for commissioner in a highly contested race, causing 460 spoiled votes. It's possible 3 other candidates could have won a seat with a portion of those votes. She also failed to post notification of the withdrawal in the polling stations until the afternoon when people noticed, and then it was just a few 8x10 pieces of white paper stuck to the desk. And now in 2024, we have grave errors that have grabbed the attention of the state. I have no faith that in the 3 elections I voted in, that my vote counted at all, as I intended. And what I'm asking you today is not to leave an entire county as collateral damage as a consequence of gross incompetence or deliberate malfeasance by the clerk. I'm asking for an audit of not only the general, but also our primary to ensure that our county was not robbed of our voice. If you certify the election knowing these issues are rampant in Weston County, you disenfranchise every voter and certainly erode our confidence in the election system and the promise made that our vote was secure. I'm asking for your help today and hope you'll consider the voters, our concerns, and our desire to audit our own ballots. As a new citizen, this is an incredible opportunity to speak to people like you, and I appreciate it very much and thank your staff for all the help they gave me to speak today.
Thank you, Ms. Sears. Any questions, comments? Any questions, comments? Not seeing any. Thank you, Ms. Sears. Hope everything's going well up there in Weston County.
Thank you.
We are currently in Zoom public comment. We have completed the second round of public comment in the room. We are now in Zoom public comment. If you're in the room and wish to comment, please raise your hand. We got one left? Klaus Helpskit. Okay. Okay, Mr. Helpscoot. Sorry, we probably did mess that up. Apologize. So, thank you very much for coming in.
Good afternoon, Secretary Gray and the State Canvassing Board. My name is Klaus Helpscoot. Full disclosure, I'm a small business owner in Albany County, longtime resident, longtime business owner. That's why you have that beautiful background you have behind me. I'm in auto repair. Full disclosure, I have been on the canvassing board for the primary and for the general election as the Democratic representative. I am also the Albany County Executive Committee State Committee man. So this is who I am, and I would like to make a couple of comments. I have, in this last week, been at the county courthouse 3 times to work on certifying this election. Thursday, we did in the morning the post-election ballot audit, which I do believe I heard somebody say earlier and correctly, that the algorithm for which ballots do get audited was set up with UW in concurrence with the Secretary of State's office. So when we actually do the post-election ballot audit, we have the county clerk's office. Full disclosure, it's a mixture of Republicans and Democrats. Not only was I there, my Republican counterpart, a wonderful lady, Kimberly Starkey, was also there. And the way we do it, I think I heard somebody say earlier that there is no physical representation of the actual ballot. That would be incorrect. So we actually break into 2 groups, the Democratic representative, the Republican representative, and a county clerk's staff. 2 of the people look at the actual photography or the photographic ballot, and we verify that the voter's intention, the little dots were filled in, and then that is compared by the other 2 officials with their digital printout, and they have to match up identical. And we go through the absentee ballots, the mail-in ballots, the precinct ballots. We don't do the provisionals, of course, because that's set aside for the executive session later in the day, which happened to be on Friday because we had to close early on Thursday. And without fail, both in the primary and in the general, they matched up 100%. So that's what we did Thursday morning. We verified that. It was perfect. It was, of course, an open meeting. There was very few people that choose to attend. Nobody came in and said anything on Thursday about any kind of voter suppression, long lines, anything along those lines. We met again on Friday to do the actual canvass. And we went through all of that, all of the precincts, verified everything. Long time going through all of them, but everything went really well. We did break for lunch. We came back. We were getting ready to go into executive session, but we did allow Mr. Martin, who came in while we were at lunch, and asked if he could make public comment. We were going to go into executive session, by the way, to do the provisional ballots. Anyhow, Mr. Martin made quite a few comments on Friday that he made today. I take exception to the voter suppression. Nobody's vote was suppressed. If people chose to leave, that was their choice. Part of the reason for the long lines was we did have a lot of new voters registering, and that did slow things down. Also, with having election judges that I think can be better trained, and I hope Roxy Hensley, our GOP chair, who's on the Zoom, will work with me in the Democratic Party to have better trained election judges for the next go round. But anyhow, that's what slowed things down. And we have no evidence that none of those people that supposedly left, don't even know the number that he gave you is correct, but we don't know that they didn't come back later. My Republican counterpart, for example, she went to go vote early in the morning, 7:30, the line was long. She turned around and left and came back and voted later in the day. So we don't know how many other people did do that. So anyhow, I contest the point that there was voter suppression. I don't believe it. Anyhow, we went into executive session. We did the provisionals. This is all done by hand. Took like 3 hours, I think, to do 29 ballots. So all of you asking for hand recounts, this is going to take a lot of time. And you think machines make a mistake. Albany County, they did not. All the mistakes in Albany County were human. And for example, maybe I shouldn't share this, but in the primary, we had some provisional ballots that we had to decline because, well, one example, we had a registered Republican come in, dealt with a Republican election judge, was given a provisional ballot and was given a Democrat ballot. You can't count that. I'm sorry. So we decided at that point in the primary that the ballots provisional should not be the same color, and they were not in the general. So we do learn, we do make improvements. So I would ask that you certify this election. Don't hold all 22 counties responsible for what excuse me, I'm getting a little dry mouth here, what Western County's mistakes were. And that does need to be looked into, but Albany County did a great job. And our recount yesterday was identical to what our original canvass was on Friday. So thank you, I appreciate the time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Halpscomb. A couple things on that. I do want to clarify, we're in the second round of public comments, so that the election was certified on a 4-0 vote probably about a half an hour ago. It was unanimous. I do want to correct a couple of things that, in terms of the post-election audit. The word that we used, and I'm looking at the notes, is a formula that was produced by my predecessor in association with the University of Wyoming Department of Mathematics and Statistics. And what that formula does is it provides a number of ballots with a 99% confidence interval for each county to examine pursuant to the post-election audit procedure. So the word was formula, and what that does is, and the clerk does not produce that number, we do. And then we communicate with the clerk by 10 a.m. the day before the election, the number that has been produced at that formula, and then they have the period they do to conduct the post-election audit itself. But the formula produces the number of ballots to be examined pursuant to the post-election audit. And in terms of the examination of the ballots, earlier we referred to the fact that the CVR, what's called the cast vote record, often the acronym that is used in the election world is the CVR, is what's examined. And that is what's called the ballot image of the ballot, and comparing it to how the machine tabulated that ballot. So when we talked about the CVR, we were acknowledging that it was a ballot image. Certainly, I think we'll go ahead and be in touch with you on the provisional issue. I think it's very important. Earlier you mentioned that maybe you shouldn't say this. No, you should say this. We need to be aware of every single issue. So we'll go ahead, Director Young, if you could try to contact Mr. Halpscomb. I think we have an email because we need to be aware on that issue. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Halpscomb.
Yeah, in reference to the comment I made about the provisional ballots in the primary, because the Democrat and Republican provisional ballots were the same color, it was easy enough to make a mistake. Now, on the general election, because of what we found out during the primary, I had nothing to do with this decision. It was the county clerk that made this decision. But because we have precinct polling places where multiple precincts go to vote, so you would have like out here in my polling place, you have 46-1 and 46-2, both there. So if a provisional ballot was for 46-1, it would be, let's say, pink. If it was for 46-2, it would be yellow. So we did correct that. So we do learn, I should say, not me necessarily, because I'm not part of the county clerk's office, but we did talk about that at the primary and changes were made. It was also talked about because of the long lines at registration, since we had many days to talk about things, since we got together 3 times in the last week, we did talk about having a separate line for registration so that people that are registered aren't slowed down when they go in to vote. I think that's a good idea. I think any improvement to make voting easier for the electorate is needed and should be looked into. But our county clerk does learn from suggestions and things that we can do to make things better. I want to commend her and her staff. And then yesterday, when we did do the recount for House District 13, we did take all the original ballots that were originally run through the ES200 machine, and then we ran them through the ES450, which is much faster, as you all know, and the results were identical vote for vote, undervote, undervote, overvote, overvote. They were identical, 2 different machines. The electronics work perfectly. We should not punish 22 counties because one county made a mistake. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hauptcom. And to respond to a couple of those points, one, we have an instance where we did have a tabulation error in a county, which you acknowledged. And then also in relation to your discussion on the provisional ballot color, one of the reasons why it's very important that we have communication. And this is an issue, it gets back to the Clerk Hadlock colloquy earlier with Mr. Jasinski, where she says, look, I'm going to call the County Clerks Association and not, the attestation on the actual test is done with our office, is I want to be aware of these issues. Now, one of the things, and uniformity is part of the election code that was done in the past, is when you had another political party in a primary, one of the directives that was done by my predecessors was using a different color of ballot for those different party primaries. So if it was no labels, or if it was Constitution Party, if they have a primary. And so that was done via directive. Now, I think one of the things we need to look at is, I think it's a very important discussion on the coloring of ballots for the provisionals. I think using a different color is an idea that we need to examine. But, using that in just one county, that's something we need to look at for our entire state. And by having these conversations, that's how we are going to be able to evaluate these issues. I want to continue to see all the suggestions that we have, and then also provide for the uniformity, because frankly, and we can get into a huge Title 22 analysis, won't do it right now, but really these elections are to be uniform with a few exceptions in the election code. And so I think that, if there's a county using a different color for provisional, that's something we need to look at being uniform around the state. So thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead, Treasurer Meyer.
Just a question. Would you object to having another voting place at UW? It seems like the more precincts you have and the more different candidates you have in one voting place, the more, I guess, leads to some, ballots not getting in the right hands, or the wrong ballots getting to the on the wrong candidate. So would that alleviate, I guess, as you get more registered people registered, the appearance at least of not having ample enough capacity to handle the number of people who want to vote?
Mr. Hauptcom, go ahead.
I'm obviously just a member of the community that volunteered to help with the canvassing board, but my personal opinion, in no official capacity other than maybe as a member of the executive board of the Albany County Dems, I don't see a problem with that. That might actually encourage more UW students to register and participate in voting. And I am a big fan of getting as many people to participating in voting. So yeah, I think that's something that should be looked into. We did have college students, thanks to redistricting, that were a little bit confused on what precincts they were supposed to go to. So if UW had its own precinct, that would eliminate a whole lot of confusion as where these college kids who may or may not be familiar with how elections are done in Albany County. I don't personally have a problem with that. I can't speak for the county clerk's office, but I would be surprised if they did. But that's not a decision that I can make, but I would be in favor of it.
Yeah, follow up on something.
Yes, go ahead, Treasurer Meyer.
And what's the, how can we, I guess, we look at learning from elections, and one of the things that I think is probably a hard thing to do is try to figure out whether or not an absentee ballot, of somebody that may or may not get the right district, but they vote it and then it comes into the wrong district. As far as trying to figure out matching up the people in those situations, is there anything that comes to mind that might make that I guess something that doesn't lend itself to some mishaps?
Go ahead, Mr. Hauptcom.
It might be easier if y'all just call me Klaus. The last name I know is rather difficult. It's Halpskeep though. Yeah, the provisionals and people go into the wrong precincts. I think a lot of that, because we have a very good county website, they had a map where you could go in, enter your address. It would tell you exactly where you had to go to vote, what precinct, polling place you had needed to go to, all the candidates that were who were on your ballot. There actually was pictures of the sample ballots for your precinct, but that would require people taking the time to go to the county website. The Albany County Democrat website, which you can go to today, also had that service available. We apparently did not do a good job, the Democratic Party, of informing our voters of where they needed to go. Some people, because of redistricting, weren't aware that their polling place had changed, and so they went to where they went to before. Well, that was no longer where they needed to be. And some of them went very late in the day and didn't have time to get to the correct polling place. So they were given a provisional ballot, which unfortunately meant if they were in the wrong ward, they weren't able to vote for the city council candidates that they could have been able to vote for because they were in the wrong precinct. A lot of things come down to, and I'm being a little bit redundant, whether it's election judges, poll workers, training. We got to have training. We got to be able to get the word out, educate our voters where exactly they're supposed to go, educate our election judges on the correct procedures. The mistakes, like I said earlier, we didn't find any voting machines, the electronic machines, the polling books worked perfectly. We had problems with printers, and that was the printer manufacturer. But the printer problems, when they didn't print out the little tag with your name on it, they could be handwritten by the judges. So that was an inconvenience, but it wasn't with the actual tabulation machines. But we need better training for our judges. We need better training for our GOP and our Democratic parties so that our people that want to go vote know where they're supposed to go vote. And as an executive county member on the Democratic Party, I take the mistakes that we made seriously, and I'm going to be pushing our board to try to rectify some of that so it's a smoother election next time around.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and Mr. Halpscutt, I really do want to emphasize, our office has made a priority of having a polling place locator that is very strong. So on our letsvotewyo.org webpage, we have a polling place locator that we launched, and there's been quite a bit of press on it, and it's a statewide polling place locator, and we're going to keep improving that. So I would appreciate, I think that the directing to that resource, and I think would be helpful. So, Mr.
Well, I can make sure there's a link there.
Yeah. Mr. Foffey, do you have anything you want to add on the polling place locator? I mean, you were kind of spearheaded that and did a great job. So, thank you. Yes,
Mr. Chairman, just a question. Is it still just Teton County and Laramie County that has gone to vote centers? Fremont has as well. Okay.
You're asking about vote centers, not e-poll books. Mr. Foffey, do you want to go ahead and answer that? Yes.
Fremont County has as well. Yep. Okay. Just curious. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Halpscutt. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Okay, we are in the Zoom portion of public comment. How many hands are still up? Okay, Ms. Drost. I thought I heard your voice earlier, but it was actually Ms. Sears, I think. Ms. Drost? Okay. Please unmute Ms. Drost. A couple things I want to note is we're waiting for Ms. Drost to unmute. We are the 5th state, I believe, according to the schedule I have in the United States, to certify this election, the statewide results. There were 3 states that did so yesterday, and then I think Delaware goes first. I think it was like Friday they did theirs, but we are the 5th state to certify. The other thing I'll note, and I'm going to emphasize this at the end as well, the Electoral College will be meeting December 17th at noon, December 17th at noon. And that is pursuant to Wyoming state law, a meeting with the governor at the office of the Secretary of State. And I want to congratulate our electors, Brent Bean, Marty Halverson, and Brian Miller. So that will be December 17th at noon. December 17th at noon. That will be the meeting of the Electoral College. All right, Ms. Drost, there you are. Go ahead and unmute, please.
I apologize, Secretary
Yes.
Gray. Thank you so much for hearing me, and I apologize I can't get my video to work. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee today. I think the last speaker did a very good job of explaining that there is a vast difference in the process that he was able to undertake in Albany County versus what you have heard happened in Weston County. And I appreciate you, Secretary Gray, that your office recognizes that there's a problem with the process. I do agree there's more training and lessons that we can learn from this on many different topics, but the gentleman from Albany County just described what happened with his canvassing board and the preparations for his election and how his clerk did a great job of bringing many people into that discussion. And I think if you can work with legislation and within your office to set a precedent for multiple people to be involved in the election processing, I think that will go a long way towards accountability to the people. I think the problem here is the process. If you have one person who is in charge of preparing the election, administering the election, and then auditing him or herself, that is a problem with the process. And I'm grateful that you've recognized that. And I hope that the Weston County experience will teach us a lot and help us to make all of Wyoming better. I do want to say that the people of Weston County do believe in accountability as well. So they voted yesterday in a meeting to forward a letter to the governor asking for the removal of Clerk Hadlock. And I respectfully request, Mr. Governor, Governor Gordon, that you would look at that and take it seriously, because our elected officials need to be held accountable for their actions. That's a big part of this process. So I thank you for letting me speak today. And I thank you for all that you've done to cast a light on better elections here in Weston County, in all of Wyoming, to make sure that everyone's vote counts all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Drost. One of the things I do want to note is we are going to be issuing a report, if you will, on our observations on this. Is going to leave us to the end, but we are going to be doing that. Looks like, Mr. Governor, do you want to, were you going towards the mic or no? Any comments? No need to. I'm not trying to, I didn't mean to call you out.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just thank you for forwarding that letter. I look forward to receiving it, and we'll take it into consideration. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for Ms. Drost? Thank you, Ms. Drost. Appreciate it. Hope everything's going well up there. Okay, we are in the public comment period, the Zoom public comment period, and the second round of public comment. Do we have any other hands up? Okay, going once, going twice. If anyone wants to publicly comment in the Zoom, now's the time to raise your hand. Going 3 times, going 4 times, going 5 times. Public comment is now closed. Are there any hands raised? Okay, and we had public comment in the room. We continue to proceed through the agenda. Just to recap, the State Canvassing Board on a 4-0 vote, it was a unanimous vote, voted to certify the election. I do want to note, I'm not trying to call anybody out, but some people do get confused. This is a little bit of a unique board. The superintendent of public instruction does not sit on it. So it is a 4-person board. So that 4-0 vote is unanimous and everybody here is present. Just want to clarify that in the primary. There were some questions on it. It's a little bit unique. We continue to proceed through the agenda. We are on point 5, further discussion by the canvassing board. Does anybody have anything they want to say? Anything they want to say? I have some concluding remarks. One thing, yes, go ahead, Governor.
I just, as I have listened to the conversation today, want to commend you, Mr. Secretary, and your staff for exceptional job. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to commend everybody that's worked this election, everybody who voted. Can we give a round of applause? Thank you. Clerks, judges, everybody who voted. It's central to our republic. And again, on a 4-0 vote, the State Canvassing Board has certified this election. A couple things I want to note. Again, December 17th at noon is the Electoral College. I want to, the emphasis for our administration is that we're always improving. And I want to make sure everyone is aware from this that we are always working on improving our elections. It's a mindset. And I look forward to working with the legislature to work on these reforms. One is proof of residency and proof of citizenship for registering to vote. Currently in the Wyoming Secretary of State's rules, there is a process for proof of identity, but what we don't have is proof of residency and proof of citizenship. And chief among the institutions being threatened by the endless waves of illegal immigration are our elections. And last year, I took action as Wyoming's chief election officer, proposing a Wyoming-based solution to ensure illegal immigrants would be prohibited from voting in Wyoming's elections. In late 2023, my office proposed and subsequently adopted rules which would have required documentary proof of Wyoming residency and prevented illegal immigrants from registering to vote in Wyoming. These rules received overwhelming support from the public. Unfortunately, they were vetoed by the governor. It's something that I really want to work on in the 2025 legislative session. In addition, we have no durational residency requirement in Wyoming. There were a series of court cases from the 1970s that undid the durational residency requirement in the Wyoming State Constitution. That means that you have to live in Wyoming for a certain period of time before registering to vote. But there are durational residency requirements that other states have, over 25 states have, that survive constitutional muster, and we need to place those in Wyoming statute. We alerted the Joint Corporations Committee to this issue in early 23. A bill was drafted for the 24 session. Unfortunately, it was heard very late in committee and then died on the floor for lack of being heard. It's very important we get that done. Also on drop boxes, the plain language of 22-9-113 provides that completed absentee ballots be, quote, mailed or delivered to the clerk. And we have been very clear on our position that that does not allow for unattended ballot drop boxes as a means of delivering absentee ballots to the clerk. And the strained interpretation that was there for one cycle only came about during the government's response to COVID-19. And I withdrew the directives authorizing those drop boxes. Those are no longer in effect. They were done by my predecessor, and I explicitly rescinded them. As Wyoming Secretary of State, I remain committed to preserving the integrity and confidence in Wyoming's elections. And I remain convinced that the use of unstaffed and unattended ballot drop boxes is not best for our state and lacks statutory authorization. I continue to be strongly opposed to their use. And I think at this point, we just got to have a more explicit ban, although I think it's pretty explicit in state law, but that's kind of the route we're looking to proceed in the 25 session. In addition, we've got to continue to strengthen voter ID. Voter ID is near and dear to my heart. It was one of the ways I first got involved in election integrity, bringing the voter ID bill that we passed in 2021, House Bill 75. One of the things that did come late in that process were some IDs that do not have a photo on them. And so I'm sure you've seen the graph, maybe you have if you're in election integrity circles, but green are the states that have true voter ID. And then there's yellow, which has ID, but in some instances not photo ID. And we're in the yellow. And most red states are in the green. So something we want to work on to have true voter ID, which is photo ID. And that's another thing that we're going to work to bring through this legislative session. I'm so excited about this 2025 legislative session. And I think there's a lot of reform that's going to be done, and we're going to be working very diligently on this. Now, in Weston County, I want to reiterate what was said a couple of times, once actually, and I want to elaborate a little bit now that we're in sort of concluding remarks. We are continuing to investigate and examine the Weston County Clerk's conduct surrounding the 2024 election, particularly around representations made to our office. Now, there are two representations. I mean, there's a number, but there are two representations I want to highlight here. One is the post-election audit, which clearly the first representation that was done where there were no observations was done in error, and it was corrected 6 days later. But that representation was done to us after we had already identified the anomaly. And the question is, if there were no observations, how is that possible? One, it was corrected, and two, it was not in line with what the County Canvassing Board certified a few days later once they conducted their hand examination. So that was a representation made to our office that is very concerning, and we are going to look at it. And then the second representation is regarding the test, as was discussed during the public comment. Clerk Hadlock was the last county to certify her test. There is a requirement that she attest to our office that that test has been completed. I was on the phone and over email with her up to, I think it was 10 p.m., the day of the deadline. And she did ultimately send in her attestation and confirm that the test was done. That's another representation to our office that we are examining. And we plan on issuing a report on it. Last announcements here, and I do want to say on the election reforms, there's a lot more on it. I wanted to cover, three slices of life of the conservative election reforms that we're going to pursue in this 25 session. But stay tuned on that. Again, wrapping up on announcements, December 17th at noon. December 17th at noon is the meeting of the Electoral College. Congratulations to our presidential electors that have now been certified: Brent Bean, Marty Halverson, and Brian Miller. Now, as you know, this board is a little different from SLIB and State Board of Land Commissioners. There are minutes that we need to examine. I think what we're going to do is to try to locate you in the coming hour to examine those, because we're still producing those. Is that, I know everybody is going to go to lunch for a little bit, but 2 p.m. hour, are you guys going to be in the building? At what time are you leaving?
Probably as soon as I can get out of
Okay. Well, we'll go to you first. Are you going to be in the building?
I think so. I don't.
Yeah, we're signing the elector thing today, so you're here till at least 4, because that's at 2:30. Are you in the building?
I'm in the general area.
Okay. Well, okay, very well. The other thing is that pursuant to state law, our electors, 22-19-104, once that is filed with our office, the Determination State Canvassing Board, we need to send that notification to the electors. So we have that meeting on the schedule for that notification. Huge election, great result for our state and our nation, and a great moment for our country. Thank you very much. I think this was a great meeting here today, and we're going to continue to work for election integrity and work for the people of Wyoming that we work for. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Motion made by Treasurer Meyer, seconded by Auditor Racinas. All those, let's have a recorded vote. All those in, okay. Treasurer Meyer.
Aye.
Governor Gordon.
Aye.
And Auditor Racinas.
No, kidding.
They do that in the legislature, and I'm an aye. The secretary is an aye, and we are adjourned with a 4-0 vote. All right. We are producing those minutes, and please remain nearby so we can complete that. And I'll see you soon on the